Welcome, friends and followers, to CEO Secrets. I'm here today with Vinny Ribas, and we are ready to kick off another show. So, Vinny, any special insights this morning before we kick off with our core content for the day?
Things are moving fast in the world, and things are chaotic and everything. And I just want to stress, if you're not following these principles, I have the feeling that people who don't follow these principles are going to get left behind, because you can't move fast enough to change fast enough, to adapt fast enough, if you don't have a lot of these things in place. And the one that we're talking about today is probably the most critical of all of those.
Yeah, I have to agree with that completely. Last night, I actually had Hugh Ballou, on your recommendation, had Hugh Ballou on the Transforming the HX show, and we talked about leadership, and we talked about elements around this very principle we're going to talk about today. And he had some really, really great insights, and kind of challenged and asked him questions about how to handle it today for startups, for existing companies, and we had a really good conversation. So I think I would say that this principle, and we're not giving the principle away quite yet because we're kind of leading into it, but I would say this principle is probably the one that I have had the most trouble with of all of the principles. And it's one that I see most solopreneurs never grow. They'll reach a certain level, but they never really break through to that next level where they can have a business that they can really sell, or a business that they can retire from, or any of that, because of principle number 3. So, Vinny, you want to share the principle with them this morning?
Basically, it says, I am the primary constraint in the system. And, we have to go back to talking about the first few steps that we had here. And that, the first one is that I view my business as a system. So you have to understand that it's not about you, it's about what you put in place and how that can be moved around and everything. And then the second one was that you are not the system. If the business is relying on everything that you do, then you're in trouble, because if you get sick, if you want to take a vacation, anything, you want to retire, as you mentioned, then there is no business, because it's all based on you. So now we've covered the side of the business of, okay, this is how we're going to build something that's valuable and something that we can grow. Now we get into, so how do we actually grow it? What are the obstacles to growing a business? And that's where this one comes in. I am, and I'm just like you, Tony. This is the thing that I have struggled with the most in all of my career. I am the primary constraint in the system. And basically what it's saying is that quite often, for most people, they base their entire business on what they know, who they know, how they feel. I mean, everything is about them. And let's face it, we all have limitations. We all do. We can't know everything. We can't know everybody. We can't be wise enough to handle every situation. We can't fill all 13 roles that we talked about. It's literally impossible to do it. Nobody can do it. And so just by that statement alone, we come to the conclusion that, okay, I'm the primary constraint here. If everything's relying on me and I'm doing everything, then something is wrong. The business will never ever grow. It won't even grow 10%, because I don't have the capacity, if I'm doing all of that, to grow the business and grow myself 10%.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, in the US here, there's 27 million, or maybe close to 30 million small businesses. And most of those, the largest percentage of those, something like 90-some%, I think, are non-employer businesses, which basically mean they're solopreneurs, or an individual. Now, some of those businesses are designed that way because that's what the people want to have. It serves their purpose. Some of those might be, just providing, giving them the capability, the structure to provide some training or things like that. So, there's a lot of opportunities, or a lot of ways that people structure those companies for that reason. But there's also a lot of those companies that are designed and intended to provide, the full income for the household or the full income for the individual that's running them. And they don't think about all these other things they've got to do a lot of times. And if they do, it's kind of like, oh, I'll get to that when. I found myself doing that this week a little bit with something because I don't have someone filling a particular role for me. So I've had to do some of that, pick some of that stuff up myself. We're in the quarantine. So every one of us, as far as most everyone I know has trimmed back their expenses where they can, has had to take on some additional work that maybe they're not the best at, but from a cash flow perspective, they've got to do that. That's just a kind of a reality. And so recognizing that, I also realized this week that if I continue down this path, I will hamper the growth of my business. And I say that because in the first couple of years of my business, I did exactly that. I became the sole deliverer of the consulting practice and the consulting services. And I couldn't grow beyond that. And it was a struggle. I did very well in those years, but I wanted a different lifestyle, which I couldn't have. So it was a constraint on the business and a constraint on my lifestyle. So I think this is a really important one. I am the primary constraint in the system. Now, a couple things to think about is we talked about the business as a system. And then last week we went a little bit deeper. I think we talked about how there are systems in the business. So the business is really a system of systems. So you are the constraint. If you're the CEO watching this, or you're the owner of the business watching this, you are the primary constraint of the business itself, this high level. And then whoever is in those roles below, they are the constraints. And you might be influencing them. You might be a constraint on them too because of how you kind of micromanage or get in their stuff or don't give them good direction or good vision. So you can be the constraint in the overall system as well as in the subsystems that make up the business.
Absolutely. It does definitely go down the hierarchy. And we'll get into all this, but the better you get at empowering people, whether they're in your company or it's a vendor or, whoever, and your customers, the better you get at putting other people in a place where they can do what they do best and they shine, and it's not relying on you, the more freedom you're going to have in your business, the easier it's going to be able to grow. And again, for me, that was a very difficult thing. I took on an assistant. Basically, she came to me for coaching to start. She got so good at what I taught her that I hired her to coach. And it's been a miracle to be able to turn clients over to her and just let her run with things. And I'm on the strategy side, but she's the one that does the day-to-day. How much time did that free up for me? It's just incredible. And so to me, you have to be in a position to, first of all, you have to understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Because a lot of people, I think they just don't recognize why they are the constraint, what they are absolutely strong at, and where they should be focusing their time and their attention. And let's face it, sometimes, somebody starts a business, but they're not the expert in that business. They bring in other experts. There's a reason why we hire consultants, or, we talked a couple of times about somebody opening a medical practice, but not being a doctor. They hire somebody who's an expert. If I pretended to be a doctor and opened up a business, that would not be a very smart move. But a lot of people just don't recognize where they're weak, where they should be turning it over to somebody else, ultimately getting to the point where the system is running itself and you're stepping back and you're the guardian of it. You're the one that's making sure that all the systems are working, but you don't have to be that workhorse in the middle of it.
It strikes me also as we look at this, let's look at big business for a second, because these principles apply across the board. It's not just for small
Absolutely.
businesses. I can think of a couple scenarios where Michael Dell is an example, the founder of Dell Computers. He built the business up, and he stepped into different roles over the course of the history of the business. And eventually he stepped back from active participation in the business. He was the chairman of the company, brought another CEO, and I don't think he had another day-to-day role in the company at the C level, at least. And he was there for several years like that, and the company was struggling. It did not go the direction. The economy changed and some other things. he eventually stepped back in as the CEO. And I don't know the status now. I haven't looked it up because it just popped in my head at this moment. But, that's an example where a big business, sometimes even the CEO that they have becomes the constraint in the system. If you look at Apple, that's another great example. Steve Jobs was a constraint as the company was growing because he was so visionary, but he didn't know what the customers wanted. And he was building these amazing computers, but it was just too much beyond what the customers were needing at that point. He eventually got fired from his own company, leaves, and the person that they brought in was the former head of PepsiCo. And that gentleman, as he grew the company, he got to a point where he was also a constraint. So they brought in another CEO. And then I think they brought in 2 or 3 CEOs. And they finally went back to Steve Jobs after he had been away it was like mid-90s. He came back. He'd been away for a while. He'd run some other companies, came back with an entirely different vision of things and really turned the company around. And so I think they were close to bankruptcy at the time. And he turned them around and they became the most valuable company at one point recently here. So I look at that and say it's not just something in the small business. It's something in any business and any organization because we have limits as human beings, as individuals.
Absolutely. It happens in nonprofits. It happens in government. It happens in, you name it, anywhere where one person is given charge, there is the risk of that happening if that person does not realize that it is not all about them, that their role should be not on the tactile side, not on the everyday side, but on the visionary side, but also on the guardian side of just making sure that the risk is mitigated and the systems are working properly, and all the roles that we've talked about, the 13 roles, they're all working together. They're all communicating and everything. But the CEO then, the person who's this guardian, can walk away, even if it's to take a vacation or whatever, or if they wanted to sell the business, here's this entire system that's already working that is basically, you don't have to sell it to someone who knows what you know. You can sell it to somebody who wants to buy a ready-made working system. And so,
I was going to say, in fact, it's often the case that you actually, when you step out, you may be selling it to a company who's got other expertise. Maybe they got a bigger client base and they want to buy your particular method of doing something, or maybe they just want to license the way that you do something. And so if you have the system in place and you recognize that you're the constraint, and it's not about devaluing you in any way when we say this, it's a matter of self-awareness. Know thyself. And if you know yourself, we've all got blind spots. This is part of the reason that I know in our business, Vinny Ribas, it's great when the two of us are chatting. It's great when we bring in your wife, Connie, because she does a lot of the administrative part of the business. But the three of us, when we get into a mastermind session about some topic that's deep, where we want to take the company next, we all have very different perspectives. We all have very different experiences in that. And I think it's so critical to recognize that we all know that we are the constraint in the system in different ways. And so we really help each other out and provide that support for each other as we grow the business. So what are some of the problems that really drive this? I know we've kind of talked around it, but let's get really direct and to the core. But what are some of the problems that cause people to be the constraint in their system?
Well, it's often what they know. You know what you know, but in order for the business to grow, maybe there's new things that you have to be aware of. The industry. I mean, there's always so much to learn, and yet there are people who have all the knowledge that you need that you could be bringing in, and that would immediately free you up. Where you're not worrying about all of. I mean, for me, in the music industry, I'm studying what's happening in the music industry all the time. I need to find somebody who does that for me and can just bring that insight in. So what did I do? I hired interns. Not hired, I have interns. Why? They're young, They're different than me as far as what kind of music they listen to, how they listen to music. They know what's happening in the trends. They're studying it in school. And so I'm able to free myself up, and I learn from them just as much as I can teach them. And I tell them that right up front. I'm here to learn from you. And it empowers them. They become very entrepreneurial in the sense that they take ownership of the projects that we give them. They jump into working with the clients, and do things that I wouldn't be able to do, take care of social media stuff, answer questions about that I haven't got a clue. And at one point, I wanted to be the social media expert, as well as the industry expert, as well as the recording expert. And if I could teach you how to sing, I would do that, but I can't sing a note. but recognizing all of their skill sets and bringing them in and empowering them has made a huge, huge difference. So it was hard for me to do that. At first I was the teacher, and I had to be the one that was the expert in all these things. Listen to me. No, I brought them in and empowered them in, and to the point where at the end of the school year, they keep volunteering. They don't want to leave. And to me, that's a great testament to being able to, empower them and have them feel good about what they're doing. So I think, your own personal knowledge is a big piece, as well as your emotional capacity and status. I mean, the way you deal with problems, the way you deal with whether the problems are business problems or personal problems, or it doesn't matter. There's always a limit to what we can handle from an emotional standpoint,
right,
before we shut down or blow up or whatever. And so being able to have other people, whether it's a consultant who comes in and helps you deal with something, or it could be even a personal development coach. It doesn't have to be a business person, but somebody that helps you with that side of it. But it's also great to be able to delegate those kind of things within your company, where you might have an entire team working on a problem and it's not on you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the two things are there. I think one is on the intern side. I have been amazed to watch how you develop interns. Number one, I mean, there's really a process in developing these interns so that they come out of the experience with Indie Connect at a whole new level. I mean, they have real skills that they can go to the market with, real experience on their resume that they can go to the market with.
I'm hiring them.
Yeah, exactly. So they're coming to you, for that. And then the other piece to it is what I've been amazed with is, we'll be in a conversation. You and I'll be in a conversation about something, trying to figure out which way to go. And you just pop the question out to the interns and they're like, well, and they throw out a different perspective. And sometimes it's like, okay, their perspective actually makes a lot of sense because of what we're trying to accomplish and who we're trying to attract, that type of thing. And other times it's like, well, that's not a fit, but oh my gosh, think about what that just opened up for us as an idea and kind of leads us down another pathway. So it's never wasted. But they're things that you and I would never come up with because, we're older than them. We've had different life experiences than them. We haven't, we're not going through the same challenges that they are right now. So it's like, if you've got a young person trying to start a business right now, these interns are far closer to what they're going through than what you and I have been, because we've been in business for so long. We know so much, we forget what we know. And so that's been a trick. And then the emotional capacity side, the emotional resilience side, that's another really key element here. I think that if you don't understand your own emotional triggers, you don't understand your own emotional ability to be resilient, you don't have a system, whether that's meditation or exercise or something to kind of rebuild yourself when you do get stressed out, when you do hit that emotional limit, if you will, you are going to be a major constraint to the system. You're just going to, the system's going to come to a grinding halt if you don't handle those things. Because even if you've got a team around you as the leader, if your emotional state is unstable, or if your emotional state is, you're not resilient enough, you could hold everyone else back because they don't want to say what needs to be said or do what needs to be done because they're afraid of what might happen to them.
That's true. It it can be a breaking point where your employees don't trust themselves enough or trust you enough not to be able to have a real conversation about something that is happening. And that, I mean, that's a critical point. I think also your own beliefs in yourself are a huge constraint. And sometimes it's the emotional side of it. Sometimes it's, I don't have the experience. I don't have the knowledge to grow beyond where I'm growing. This is all I know. This is what I'm going to do. And again, it's not about you. You have the vision. You know where you want to go. Let's go find the people who know how to make that happen. And, you know, we belong to CEO Space, which is a perfect example of an organization where you can go in with just a vision. I have an idea, and all these business experts anybody who believes in you will come together and say, well, I can do this part of it. I can bring these contacts in. I can open this door. And all of a sudden, you're the visionary. You're protecting your vision, but you've got other people that are taking all of the roles that you would have to study for years, and you'll never get that kind of experience and everything. And yet it's sitting right there. There are people that have that are looking for you. So I think, you know, the belief that we have in ourselves, the belief that we have what our limitations are as far as our abilities, our experience, our confidence in ourselves as a leader, all these different things. You know, I mean, there was a time when I could not have employees. I wouldn't be a good leader. I wouldn't, you know, what do I have to offer to interns? You know, it's all of those things definitely affected the growth of my business until I was able to say, but it's not about me. This is what, you know, this is where the experience comes from, and we'll grow together. We'll take, you know, I'm taking on a new client right now that I've been hesitating to take on because she's a very unique challenge. She's incredible, absolutely incredible. But there's a few things that, you know, she's 13 years old, and I don't really want to deal with that that much, but she's amazing, so I'm going to. And there was a time when I would not even consider it. It's you have to grow in your own confidence in yourself, and you have to know what it is that you are capable of, and then delegate the rest of it, or find the help to get the rest of it.
Kind of taking a kind of a turn here, if you will, for a moment. I think what you just described is because you are the primary constraint in your system, right? All of us are. We have to decide where we want to grow. We've got to decide. So, as an example, this new client that's coming on board. It's interesting. Very different scenario for me, but I had a client approach me, and they said, you know, we're ready to move to another level. We've been working together for about a year now, I guess, a little over a year now. And they said, we're ready to move to another level. This is what we want to do. This is what we think it looks like. And they want me to develop a train the trainer program so they can essentially not have to invest in having me come in or someone on my team come in every single time they have turnover. And I'm like, you know, there's a part of me that said, you know, in the past, I would have been like, I am not training other people how to do what I do, because that means I lose income, right? And I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. So today, you know, the last few days I've been kind of putting together my ideas on this. This is very cool. This could really dramatically shift some things. And I could actually, if I develop this element of train the trainer, I can sell that program to a whole lot of other people, which means I have that much more influence in the world. The way I see customer experience should be designed will have more impact around the world. So I'm like, this is cool. Let's take this on. And I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know it's not going to be perfect. I know there's going to be a lot of things I have to work through. I'm going to have to get people who have done this before and get their advice on things. But I'm actually thrilled and excited about the possibility of where this can go. And it's one of those things. If you look at it, part of this has been in the plan. We've had this plan, you know, for since we started last year. We've had a roadmap of where we're going to go get the leaders trained. Next, we train the staff. It's gone slower than expected, but a lot of things have happened. His company's been growing and scaling. Now we've had COVID-19. And so he's trying to figure out ways, how do I how do I expand and keep building this skill set so my team members are not the constraint in the system, right? That's what he's thinking about. And at the same time, he's like, okay, but I got a budget. So how do I keep it within some type of reasonable range that doesn't get too expensive? And so that just opened. So this is an example where COVID opens the door for me to create a whole new level of offering in my business that I had not developed yet. Something's been on my mind, but I've never done it. So I think it's interesting. If we look at what we believe, the constraints in the environment around us and what's affecting us, and look at the people in our system that are potentially constraints, all of it can cause us to actually get more creative, which is why this is actually a very positive principle to have in place, I think, because the constraints allow you to say, okay, what can I do? How can I overcome? What can I be creative with what I have? We have the asset inventory list we talked about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And in that episode, we talked about, getting to know everything that you've got available to you, your assets that are tangible, intangible, intellectual property, all of these things. Well, that's where it comes into play. Now that you've got a constraint that you recognize, how can you work and overcome that constraint with creativity?
Absolutely, and you're hitting the nail right on the head, because with COVID-19 and everything right now, the people who are stuck are the ones who have, their constraint was, I have to have the office, I have to have the business, I have to have the physical location, I have to have this, I have to have that. And the ones that are at least maintaining and staying above water are the ones that have been able to adapt and said, okay, I don't know how to do online stuff, but shoot, there are people who know how to do it, and I'm going to learn. And all of a sudden that takes off. And so if you're relying strictly on what you know, or like you just talked about, if you're relying on, if you're worried that I don't have the resources, I don't know somebody who would invest, I don't know someone who would teach me or mentor me, and you let that stop you in your tracks, instead of reaching out and saying, who do I know who knows who? Who do I know who knows that industry? Who do I know who might, have contacts with investors? Where can I go to find these kind of things? I live on LinkedIn. Anybody that's out there that wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. Vinny Ribas, because I have, 12,500 contacts or something like that.
Every time I think I'm catching up with you, I've got about 6,000. Every time I get close, you just like shoot to the moon again. I can't keep up with you.
It's been amazing how I've been able to use that as a resource to be able to find contacts. Now, you and I and 2 other partners are growing a brand new business. And in order to do that, we needed, for part of it is in the music industry. So I needed to have some really high level contacts in the industry that I didn't have. I went on LinkedIn, started talking it up a little bit, and it's amazing. The leaders of the major companies in the industry are coming out of the woodwork and saying, we want to be part of this. It was simply, I didn't have those contacts, but I had a resource that this is where you connect with people who are connected. And so if you let your personal limitations stop you, then, and especially in this area, there are so many people, and especially at this time, there's so many people who are out of work who would jump on anything that looks like it had promise to be able to survive this kind of an atmosphere in the world. So there are so many people who are passionate about what you do that you just don't know about and would love to invest, whether it's an individual or a company that would come on board and would love to be a part of that, would love to be able to help you take that to another level, because it'll help them move to another level. There are, we get locked up in this is my domain. And this right. is what, this is where I live, and this is where I'm destined to live. I think that's a big thing. A lot of people are constrained by that belief that, I do this, and that's all I do, and that's all I know, and so therefore that's all I'm ever going to do.
Yeah, so they may say, okay, I don't know how to do something. Get into psychology a little bit here. There's often this fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. The fixed mindset being that they believe the skills that they were born with, the skill that they have today, is all that they, as far as they can go. They can't develop them. Growth mindset really speaks to this belief that, hey, I can learn, I can grow, I can adapt, and that's a very short explanation of it. But there's some great research out there around the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And if you come into business and you've got a fixed mindset, and all of us do have fixed mindsets somewhere in our life or in our professional career, we've got some element of fixed mindset. And we probably also have some element of growth mindset, because all of us are adapting on a daily basis, whether we want to admit it or not. But I think once you look at the beliefs and what you believe about it, there's another level that holds a lot of people back. And that's their relationships with other people. It's how they handle other people, how they manage their employees or their team or their vendors, how they interact with their customers. It's that social emotional connection. Like, how do they engage? How do they talk with? What's the emotional intelligence, if you will, that really helps them navigate things? Some people just should not be out in front of the public. They should be behind a computer and that, and where they are, they can grow and learn, and maybe they change that. I mean, that's something that, I hated being out in public. I hated being out in the front. I love being behind a computer, even like this, having a one-on-one conversation. But I've had to adapt so I can speak on the stage.
I need a stage.
You love being out in front of people. That's awesome. But you're a musician and a performer and all that. You've got that history of it. I've had to adapt. I've had to teach myself some tricks to be able to stand in front of 1,000 people and give a talk and be fully engaged in that talk. It's taken me a whole lot of work, but by the same token, you look at we've all probably had a manager where, like, how in the world did they become a manager? They may have been really good at their technical skills and they got promoted up to that level of management. People thinking, well, they'll make a great manager. Look how good they are as a customer service rep, or look how good they are as a salesperson. They'll make a great leader in sales. And that's not necessarily the case. So we've got to think about that, and someone who may be really good solving technical problems may not be good on the phone with a customer, or as a customer success or customer service agent. So we've got to be aware that the people's skills in their relationship, their emotional connectivity skills, those are constraints as well. And it may be the leader of the business, the CEO, the business owner. It could also be the people on the front lines that are holding it back.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you can look around and see a lot of times where businesses have two people have come together as a partnership because they have separate skill sets, and somebody is the visible portion of the company. They're the one that's in the public and talking to the public, and then it may not be the CEO. It could be, it could be the partner. It could be, a vice president or something, but somebody is taking that role because that's not where the CEO has the strength and recognizes that. And so, and it not only falls on the personality side, it also falls on the side of, well, you and I are in the film business, the TV production business. Have we ever had that experience before? Absolutely not.
Nope.
I'm the CEO.
I watch a lot of TV and movies, but I mean,
I'm the CEO of two companies that do this, and I had never been in that industry before. I was brought in by somebody who knew production and needed somebody who knew business to be a partner. And then I brought you in because we have a business channel, a TV channel, and you're my business partner. So we develop this kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be on the channel, or that we need to recognize other people are developing. And so I could have been, you could have been locked into our own beliefs of, I've never done that before, so I'll never do it. I'll never be able to do it. It doesn't work. You and I have another new business with two other partners. We've never been, well, I was in that business once back in 2013, did what, I had some experience with it, but nothing like what we're doing right now. and we all have different skill sets that we're bringing together. We're all equal partners. We have different sets of contacts, different resources, and together it's going to make it so incredibly strong compared to if I had just found, this and said, I can do that.
Well, I think this is a great example, because we've got 4 partners coming together because what we want to do has not ever been done before. And not just by us, but it hasn't been done before. We're doing something that's different and unique. And so all 4 of us bring to the table things that we have done before that can contribute to the creation of this new way. So we're actually like synthesizing all of these different elements that we've, skills we have, experiences we've had in the past, what we've done. I mean, I never thought I'd be, my experience in the meetings and event industry, and the hospitality industry is coming into play in ways that I never thought I would go back to. But I love it, and I love where we're headed with this. And so I think that's right. It's how you bring together a team that really overcomes the constraints that you individually have or you couldn't take on. I mean, we've done things together that I'll just a simple example. Our book, Leverage. We wrote that book back in 2016, #1 bestseller. At that, prior to that, I didn't believe I could write a book. I had just written one before that, but like in 2015, I didn't believe I could write a book. I wanted to. I'd been trying for 5 or 6 years to write books. Nothing. It just wouldn't happen. It was, I got in my own way. And then there was a series of events that happened, and I said, well, maybe if I partner with someone to write a book. So I wrote my first book, partnered with Kayla Curry, and then shortly after, within 4 or 5 months, you and I and Connie got together and we wrote Leverage. And so it's one of those things where when you come together with people that have strengths where you don't, and you allow them to shine and they allow you to shine, it just becomes a phenomenal opportunity for everyone involved.
Yeah, and it amplifies everything so much. It's incredible. The program, the business that you and I and Will and Cristiano are working on started out as being in one industry and has grown to the point where we can see it being a global phenomenon that's going to unite people all over the world. And it only came about because you have the business side of things, and Cristiano is very involved in sports, and I'm involved in the film and TV side, and Will is involved in music, and I'm also involved in music. And we're bringing all these pieces together to create something that's huge, and none of us have an ego about it. That's the beauty of it. It's like everybody knows this is where my strength is, and this is where I'm going to be concentrating, and he's good at this, and he's good at this, and he's good at this. So we just trust that somebody's got the skill sets that you recognize, and let them shine. You said it. You've got to let them shine. When everybody shines, the whole unit shines so much brighter than any one person could ever shine. So it's a critical thing to recognize where your constraints are. Now, I want to mention one thing. Your limitations, when you're trying to put a team together, it doesn't mean you have to have employees, doesn't mean you have to take on a partner. It could just be a friend who's a good advisor that you can go to and just say, there are probably 6 people who I coach in the music industry that I don't charge. I just love what they're doing. I'm not the right coach for them as far as where their career is going, because I don't know that aspect of the industry, but I do know the music business. So when they have a music business question, they come to me. There are people who I consult in the same way when I have certain questions about the industry in areas that I don't know. Or in how do I manage interns? I went to somebody who had interns to find out about that. It doesn't have to cost you money. It just has to be where you recognize that somebody else has the expertise or the knowledge or the skills, the experience that you need to at least know about. You need to, to broaden your horizons to be able to find the right person for the long term or something. I've been there too often where I was locked into it's all about me. And once we started writing this book, especially, that's when it really dawned on me how much constraint I was putting on my own business.
What's fascinating is I just had a flashback here as you were talking, Vinny. One of the things, and we had a really good debate about this when we were coming up with these principles. One of the things that almost everyone, if any business owner will tell you, is that their constraint is money. It's one of the most popular things that people will say. And if someone says that, it's not critiquing them, but it's a level of awareness that it's not the money that's the problem. And I've heard someone say, if you think money's the problem, that's the problem. It's how you think about money that's the problem. And I think what you've just described here is, the value that you can receive and the value you can create by giving, right? You go out there and you network with people and you have these conversations. You might have a piece of brilliant insight for them that they can take in their business, and they say, well, let me connect you with so-and-so because I know that's what you need next, right? So it's about being of value and being in service to other people. And then also at the same time saying, this is what I'm looking for. Who would you know? And there's a part of human nature that we want to reciprocate. We want to give back to someone who's been good to us, who's been nice to us. So we don't go out there and give just to get. When you and I go to networking events, they're not even networking events. We go to things where like people are masterminding, trying to come up with ideas for their business, how to move things forward. When we put those on, or when we go to those, we're out there just to give as much as we can give. And we know that being a person of, one author calls it being a person of increase, right? Being a person who's out there and giving value to other people, that person doesn't have to get worried about things coming back to them. And whether you believe in karma or something else, or the universe, bringing things back, part of it is humans want to reciprocate. They see goodness, they want to give back. And so they may say, wow, you this is such a kind person over here. You've got to meet Tony. You've got to meet Vinny. You've got to meet someone else. They did this and this for me. And it's funny because I've had that happen, like as we've been doing this show and I've been doing some of the other podcasts, as I bring on guests, they start asking me after we get off air, like, what can I do to help you? Because I've just served them by letting them have a platform. And that wasn't my intention. I want to have them because I want to serve the people that are in my, my followers and that. So I think it's important to recognize that money it may look like it's the constraint, especially right now. Cash flow may seem like it's the constraint. But I will tell you that no matter how much you believe that, there is something else. There's something deeper that is the real constraint in your business. And if you unlock that, the money will flow. Money cannot hold itself back. Only we can hold ourselves back.
You're absolutely right. I think that's probably the biggest reason that people do not grow their business. It is their mindset about the money. It reminds me of something that I teach entrepreneurs. When they're growing a business, they're starting a business, a lot of times you have to get seed capital. And the seed capital is the initial investment that you get. It's, small chunks of money, probably from friends, family, and fools, they call it. But, people who believe in you, people who want to help. And, but a lot of people are totally afraid to approach their friends and family about investing in them. And, sometimes they have this preconceived notion that they're never going to help. Sometimes it's their own, why would anybody invest in me? It's their own constraint on how they believe. But I always taught, just imagine if you had a brother who was building a business and you had money that you could invest, and that business went on to be really successful, but they never asked you in the beginning if you were interested in possibly investing. How would you feel? I always, when I am starting a business and if we need cash, I'm going to the people I know. I'll say, you may not be interested in this, but I don't want you to ever come back to me and say you didn't have a chance to say no or say yes. I want you to have that opportunity. And it's just a mindset. It took a switch in mindset, because before that, I'd be shaking trying to talk to anybody about money, and now it's like, well, money is just part of business. That's all. And some people are really good at money and love to invest, or they bring something to the table. I mean, we have one of our partners is putting up some of the money for the new venture that we have. And that's what he does. So it was not, it was his decision. It was his idea right off the top, instead of us trying to struggle to find the money. And so it is money probably has the biggest impact on the way we grow our business. Obviously, if you don't have enough money, it bottlenecks you even more. But there is money out there. There are also other resources that don't require money. And I gave, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, I gave the example of, I have an artist that I'm coaching who said, my wife's job has gone away because of the virus. And so I can't afford to, you're coaching for a couple of months. And we started talking, and I said, nowadays people are bartering things. And I said, that's become a big part of the economy, and it's going to keep getting bigger as money dries up for some people. And he said, well, the only thing I have to barter is a riding lawnmower that I inherited when I bought a house. I said, well, I happen to need a riding lawnmower because I'm looking to move, which we just bought a house with 1.5 acres, and it's all flat land that needs to be mowed. So I traded 3 months of coaching for a riding lawnmower. And it was seamless, absolutely seamless. It solved the money problem. And there was no, he loved it because he's getting the coaching and we've moved his business forward. I loved it because I was, that was something I was going to have to go hunt for. It's a win-win across the board, and it didn't cost anybody any money.
Absolutely.
And so, how you're thinking about the money, it's if you're looking at it as a constraint, then you've got to reevaluate the way you're looking at it, or find somebody who's really good at the money part of it. Because there are people who know how to go out and get money. There are people who know how to, maybe it's a strategic partner and you don't need the money. What they're bringing to the table is what you were going to have to pay for. There's a lot of ways to solve the money problem.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And it really does come back, as you said, it really does come back to the mindset, or your beliefs about money, or your emotional triggers around money, which are triggered by your deep beliefs, your subconscious beliefs. Maybe your family didn't have money, or you saw your mom or dad lose their job, lose their business, something, happened. And so you've got that kind of pre-wiring there. It doesn't mean you're at fault for it, but you do have the responsibility to overcome that constraint now, either by developing the skills. One of the best things to do is go out there and find someone to help you develop the skills, move through that emotional, trauma. If it is, I'm not using that worded correctly. I really do mean sometimes there's financial trauma in families, and to move through that. And then as a result of that, you'll be able to do these things yourself, or you can bring people in. As you're going through that process of growing and learning, bring people in around you who are capable of it. Don't shy away from it. Don't not put your eye on it, because I've made those mistakes in my business, and that's not a good thing to do. You've got to come back and fix those problems eventually. So let's look, what is something else that as we're doing this, we've talked through a lot of problems. What are some of the things that people can do to overcome the constraints that they have? How would you look at it? What are some of the positive ways to look at this challenge and move forward?
I think one of the biggest things is to have some kind of an advisory board, whether it's a formal advisory board and you're paying people, but most of the time it's just, having a group of people that you can mastermind through the challenges with. And quite often it's people who get together who will help each other. You and I and Connie, and we have people that we get together with and just talk about, okay, what's your challenge this week? What's your challenge this week? And then everybody's helping out. And it's not costing anybody anything but lunch or not nothing if it's on a Zoom call. And, I mean, that's what coaching is. It's basically working with somebody and trying to work through their problems. But when you have a collective working on your problem, then it's, well, I can bring this resource to the table. I know this contact. You need to talk to this person. I know how to do that. Here's a book to read that'll do it. Here's a video. It's amazing when you surround yourself with people who don't have the same constraint that you have mentally or emotionally. And they can walk you through that. At the same time, you've got to be the giver and you're helping them. It's a win. It's got to be a win-win or you shouldn't play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key thing, is coming at it from a giving perspective. And, on that same line of thinking there, I was just thinking about it as you were talking. I'm like, okay, I've got a call that after we get done with this, I got a call that I'll jump on with one gentleman that we've been doing weekly calls almost every week for 5 or 6 years. This evening, I've got a call with a master of sales who I have been talking with for every week almost for, I think, 4.5 years. My co-author Betsy with Profitability, the book behind me there, we talk several times on a weekly basis. We do a podcast together now, but even outside of that, we talk on a weekly basis, and we brought a third partner into some of the stuff that we're doing to really go. So it's like, I'm just thinking about all these people that I have built. And honestly, it really comes back to this whole idea that it was around the time that you and I met that I start to understand this whole idea of building a network of different people with different skill sets, and using that network, giving into the network, making deposits into that network. And then when required, making withdrawals from the network, right? Saying, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I need. Here's what I need insights on, or here's someone I need to be connected with. And the funniest thing is that when you ask those questions, and this is another mindset thing that I've learned in this whole process. When I ask for something, I used to feel awkward asking, like I was being a burden to someone else. And what I've learned is that just as much as I want to give, everyone else that I'm associated with in these groups wants to give as well. So they see it as like, yes, I get to give, I get to help Tony out with something. And once I began to realize that, it relieved this whole emotional constraint that I was having. And so now I'm willing to ask a whole lot more. And as I mentioned, I'm doing these other Facebook Lives, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. And I reached out to Hugh Ballou on your recommendation. He and I had actually just talked last week, but I didn't have a guest for last night. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, Hugh, would you want to be on my Facebook Live on Thursday night? And he's like, anything for you. I was like, wow, okay, cool. And so it's that type of thing. You develop these relationships, you build this, and you give into the network that you're part of. And when the time comes, they'll want to give back to you. So it doesn't even feel like you're begging or asking. That's not it. You're receiving back because you've been a huge value to the network.
That's a huge point. In the music industry, I talk a lot with my artists about there's ways to get people to basically join your fan club, and they will give you $10 a month or something like that just to help you go, help you keep going. And the people that have built that are making it fine through this whole time where there are no gigs for them to perform in. But a lot of people are afraid to ask their fans, whether it's a Kickstarter campaign where you're raising money for a fan funding program. So you're raising money for an album or something like that, or this long-term fan club. And I always talk about people love to help others succeed. And the reason that you've got fans is because they see you as kind of a rising star that they can latch onto and they can follow, but they can also help. People absolutely love to feel like they are part of your success. They want to feel like they're part of your success. You've got to give them opportunities. How dare you take that away from them when that's what they want? They want to be part of your success. And every business owner has the same the same aura, or that's not the right word, but you're in the same situation. Your customers want to see you succeed because they need you to be there. They want to see you succeed because you're a great person and you treat them right. So they're going to help. In the whole 9/11 challenge, look at companies like Southwest Airlines, where people were buying stock just to make sure that they stayed in business, when all the other airlines were dying because they couldn't fly. So if you build your network to where you are helping other people, you are giving, you're a good person, people want to reciprocate. And there is a time when it's the right time to say, okay, it's my turn to receive. And I think the biggest point that I've always tried to point out with people is, you can help this person and you can help them a lot. It doesn't matter. You may not get that reciprocal, that coming back from them. You just help and give and be selfless about it. I do believe in universe or karma, however you want to do it. It's going to come back to you. It may not come back over there. It might come back over here with somebody else, somebody totally unrelated, but it will come back to you. I don't think there's a way that it can't come back to you. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again, where all of a sudden somebody gets a huge break totally out of nowhere, and I know it's just because they've been giving and giving and giving, and it was their turn to receive, and whether they asked for it or not, it was presented to them.
I think the only way you don't receive is if you hold it back. You are the one in your mind, saying, I'm not worthy. It's not for me. I could never. That's the only way. Because
say that. That's exactly
it's funny because it's like, we are the biggest constraint in our business in so many ways. And we're the biggest constraint. This is the guy bleeding into our personal lives here. We're the biggest constraint in our own personal lives too, because there is opportunity and abundance and everything available to us. But if we're the ones kind of saying, well, it's not me, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough for that. Who would ever want to help me? Whatever that is, or maybe they've got a hidden agenda, instead of just recognizing that because we've been giving, it's the natural course of things that we receive back.
Mm-hmm. I think I don't know why it is that we have that feeling that we don't deserve to be successful. And I've been there. There's no question I've been there. In the whole sense of, I don't want to be a consultant because I don't think I'm smart enough. You're the one that helped me through that. I remember the time when you said, I should be a business consultant. And I said, what do I have to offer? And you said, well, how many businesses have you helped through CEO Space? I said, well, about 1,000. Well, don't you think that's enough experience to be able to help? I mean, that was a mindset change, because for me, it was, what do I know? I've never built a huge successful business that I can teach somebody else.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we don't recognize what our constraint is. And I think this is probably one of the biggest issues is you've got to have people that you trust to help point these things out. You are not the best person to do this. How many people do all their own graphic design and yet it's not strong enough? And everything else in their business may be great, but their branding doesn't do them justice.
Right.
Or they're out, trying to be the salesperson and they just flub their way through it, and they don't, or they overtalk and oversell or whatever. And then they complain that they don't have business. I'm out there selling. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have, we have 13 roles we identified, and you have got to have all of those covered with some level of expertise, and nobody can have them all. So it's really important that if you don't know what your constraint is, and sometimes it's not very visible in the business itself. Sometimes it's things like you don't have a vision for where your business is going. You don't have a plan in place. You're just winging it. And that's a huge constraint. It's up to you as the CEO to have a vision, to have a mission statement, to have a vision for where the business is going, to have a plan in place, a strategy on how you're going to get there. And these are things that, unless you're involved in your business, somebody might not know that you don't have that. You're not a great leader. If you're not involved in the business, you might not know that. So you do have to have people that are familiar with what you're doing, but you can also go to people outside of that and say, go to your customers. What do you like? What don't you like? You know the whole idea of using them. They're one of your teams. We talk about team of teams. You've got team of employees. You got a team of vendors. But they all can talk to each other, and often do. And you've got to coordinate them all. That's part of your CEO role as the guardian of the business, and tap into them to find out where your weak points are. Because sometimes it's one weak point that is the breaking point of the whole business. You may be absolute genius at all these other areas, but that one thing.
I would actually amplify that and say there's always just one thing. In other words, there's one constraint in this moment that if you unlock, it will allow you to move to the next level. And I say that based on years and years and years of experience of actually doing consulting and working with businesses, but also understanding systems theory, having studied that as an academic discipline, if you will. There's one constraint in the system. Now, it may be something complex that you have to figure out. It may take you several steps to get through it. But once you unlock that one constraint, everything else begins to move. And then you'll find there's another constraint. So it's a never-ending process, but that shouldn't be defeatist. Shouldn't defeat you. It should give you the opportunity to say, oh, so I can grow. And it's not like I'm going to go from here to there. I can grow to here, and I can grow to here, and I can grow to here, and I can grow to here. And you're going to have to learn the whole time. One of the things, and I want to touch on this, I know we've been going for a while here, but one of the key things that we've talked about in the book, Vinny, is developing critical thinking skills. And that's something that not enough people have learned because they don't teach critical thinking in school anymore. And we don't have enough exposure to it in life or in business. So maybe I know you talk a lot about critical thinking. So maybe give us an idea of what critical thinking is, and then we can kind of dive into how people could develop some of those skills so that they are really able to move their business forward.
Sure. Critical thinking is the ability to see all of the aspects of something and understand how different areas are connected and what are the repercussions of this happening, or just being able to identify challenges, being able to identify possibilities, opportunities, and looking at it from a very critical standpoint, and being able to be very honest about it, and not look at it from the standpoint of, what's the prestige out of this, or, how's that going to make me look, or what, you're looking at it from a very, it's not that you have to dissect something so small. You have to just be able to understand the repercussions, the good and the bad of the decisions that you're making, and being able to make really good decisions based on true facts, based on reality, based on experience, based on where the market is going. I mean, you have to be able to look at the things that influence your decisions, so that you make the right decisions as often as possible. And a lot of people, they don't have the critical thinking skills, so it's all intuition, and that doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always work. If you're not thinking critically about your decisions, you might be spending way too much money on something, or not spending enough. You might not have the coverage, the protection, the risk protection that you need. It's these kind of things where you need to be able to look at a decision that you need to make and be able to look at all the factors that are involved and being able to decide based on all of these factors coming together, and not just on one thing, not just on this is what I want, this is what I like. It's not emotional. It's definitely, the critical part of it is that one point could change everything. One little factor. And if you don't see all the factors and how they work together, then you often won't make the right decision. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, absolutely. So critical doesn't mean you're critiquing someone. It doesn't mean you're being a pain in the ass, for lack of a better term, but it means you understand what the key thing that needs to happen right now. It's making the key decision right now and being able to think about things. And as you said, look at the pros and the cons, look at the good and the bad, look at the consequences. If I do this, here are the range of consequences that could happen. Here are the ones that are more likely to happen. If I do it this way, here are the range of things that might happen, and here are the most likely of those that could happen. And critical thinking is something that I think if you look at a lot of businesses did not have in place, because yes, there's very, very little chance that COVID-19 would hit. I mean, let's look at it realistically. No one would have predicted this, right? But we could predict another recession. Absolutely. There's no question about that. There were markers 2 years ago that we were going to head toward a recession. What it took was some catalyst to cause people to lose faith in the economy and just to hold back and stop spending money, which that's what COVID-19 did, because people basically couldn't go to the store and spend money. So that caused the recession. Now the whole belief system is following that, like, oh no, can we reopen? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can we invest in things? And so critical thinking, if people had been critically thinking about this, said, how are we going to survive the next recession? What could the next recession look like? What if we can't open our retail store or our office or whatever else? What if we have to be remote? And not that they had to have everything, had to invest in all the technology and have everything ready, but at least going through the thinking process and having a plan of action of how do they take action. Now, there are some companies that were very well prepared. I'm thinking of one of the CEOs we talked to in New Zealand on the Really Know Your Customer podcast. They were prepared, and they went to remote office settings, so people working from home and things like that, even before they were required to, because they could flip that switch very quickly. But then they had to switch up how they did meetings and all this other kind of stuff. So they took some time and really thought through, how can we do this? How can we really make this work well? And so I think critical thinking is a skill that's really, really valuable today and necessary today because of how fast things are moving. We've got to be prepared. What if it suddenly shifts, the market shifts, or something happens and nature takes, takes an unfortunate direction this way, or, I lose a key employee in my business, or a key client decides, that for whatever reason they're going to leave. All of those require some thinking in advance, not dwelling upon them, but thinking about how would we react, how would we respond, and at least having a plan of action in place to get you through the first few steps of that, so you're not emotionally stuck. You know that you can take some action to move forward and not be sitting, because otherwise you become the constraint in the business again. It may look like the client or the weather or something else, but it's really you that is the constraint, and your inability or lack of pre-planning.
Absolutely. Pre-planning is an important part of it, but it's also in real time. When something happens, a fire, whatever, something critical happens, and the ability to critically think through, what are my options? What of all the options, which ones could I live with? Which ones am I okay with? Which ones are going to be morally acceptable to me, ethically acceptable? I mean, seriously, because we get tempted with, what if we just did this? What if we just did that? We can, I'm not going to go deep into that, obviously, but when things get really, really tough, when something really drastic happens, we look at drastic ways to get out of it.
Right.
And that's when I think it's most important to be able to look at something from a critical standpoint and be able to analyze it. And sometimes you have time to do it, but sometimes it has to be done quickly. What this happened, what is going to be our response, our next move?
Well, I would even suggest, Vinny, that I think critical thinking, to do it right, cannot be done in the midst of a crisis where emotionally you are caught up in the crisis. Critical thinking has to be done when you're not in a deeply emotional state. You're not constrained by your emotions. And I say that because you can't critically think when you're in an unpleasant or negative emotional state, or a very positive and happy emotional state. You can't critically think there either. They've proven that in some very interesting research. And so critical thinking has to happen when you're in a relatively neutral, maybe a slightly positive state. And so that's why I think it has to be done in advance. Now, you want to have a bit of a plan in place so that you have when the critical thing, or when the unexpected event happens, right? If you have a plan of action in place, it gives you a runway to be emotionally neutral or slightly positive. Say, okay, we're good for the next couple of weeks. Now, what do we do? And so it gives you the runway to start thinking about, where do we go? It's like think about it from a budgetary perspective, right? You've got people who live literally paycheck to paycheck, day to day, and they don't really have a runway to think about, okay, what happens if they could move that out and say, hey, I've got my bills covered for the next 2 weeks. It gives them this breathing room that they can make different decisions with. They're not also caught up in, okay, I'm going to have to pay this bill late and then get charged an extra $20 or $30, right? That's a personal example, but that's one that in this time frame might be very relevant for people. How do you move yourself so that you've got a little bit of a runway so you can think calmly and clearly about what's happening? And then, because you don't want to be in the midst of a crisis, the worst time to try to critically think is in the midst of a crisis where your emotions are just out of control.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. I think we're looking at the negative side of it. I think there's also, you have to have critical thinking skills when something really good happens. You're given the chance to take on this really big contract. And if you've thought about building your business in a way where it's scalable, which is what we're teaching here in a lot of ways, because obviously if you're the biggest constraint, you can't duplicate yourself, you can't scale your business. But sometimes the really good happens. Me being given the opportunity to get into the film and TV market, which is an extension of the music. I mean, it's still entertainment. I love it. The purpose behind it is to help people and influence what they're watching on TV. I love it. I love the mission behind it and everything. But if I didn't think through it critically, I would have just poo-pooed it and said, I'm not in that industry. I don't know anything about that. I don't think I could do that. But I looked at it from the perspective of, who do I know who's in this industry? Who do I know who knows how to bring in the money that we need? Who do I know that, just can walk me through this part of the legal side, or the logistics side of it? Here's a big part of it. What is going to be my role? And do I have to cover all the roles? Do I have to learn how to produce films? No, I can hire a producer. Great. I can run a business. So you have to be able to critically look at, what could happen in a negative situation, what could happen in a really good situation, something that's going to shift your business. It could be that it's going to go wide. It could be that it's going to go deeper. We've got to ramp up this. We've got to ramp up that. It's like somebody buying machines for their factory, knowing that those machines are going out of business and there's no way they're going to get, parts, or if they need to buy more, they won't be able to, because, this
right.
is you know what I mean? I mean, the technology
the technology is old and yeah, it's out of date, and they're not.
Yeah, and so, you're going after what's cheap. Let me go do that. But it leaves you unable to scale. And that's a matter of critical thinking when you're making that buying decision. Do I want something that's going to get me through right now, or do I want something that will be around for years so that I can just grow? It can grow with me. I can grow with it, and we can expand as we need to. We plan on expanding. We plan on growing bigger. So it's those kind of critical decisions that are so. If you can't make the critical decisions, then that's a huge constraint. And I'm going to say sometimes critical decisions should not be made by one person. Sometimes it's the right time to bring that board of advisors, whether it's formal or not, or your board of directors. There are decisions that you need to bring to your team, whether it's, it could be your employees. Bring the decisions to them and let other people bring their expertise and their emotions, their foresight, their experience, everything. Let them bring that to the table. And then you're the one that weighs it all and makes that critical decision.
Absolutely. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to look at kind of the flip side of the coin to critical thinking. And this is something that honestly, I believe I was a pretty good critical thinker. For many years, I developed that left brain thinking side because as an analyst for so many years in corporate America, I have had to take a different approach. I have had to actually quiet down the critical thinking a bit because it was overdeveloped, and I've had to amplify my intuition. And I've really been focused on that this year is trusting my intuition more rather than critically thinking about, there's critical thinking, and then there is being critical, right? and I took it too far. I mean, that's it. I overdeveloped that skill set, if you will. And so I was judging everything I was doing and doubting whether, I intuitively felt, okay, that might be the right approach or whatever else. I wouldn't take action because I was like, what, this could go wrong and this could go wrong and this could go wrong. And by the time I made the decision, it was too late. Oh, well, I guess I wasn't meant to do that kind of thing, and so in my mind, we have to develop critical thinking. That's something that's missing in a lot of businesses today. But on the other side, we also have to honor and develop intuition, because intuition is where our subconscious mind, our emotions, basically are the connection between our body and mind. Our emotions are the information system of the subconscious mind. And I heard that this week, and I was like, yeah, that is it. I've heard that before, but it was like a good reminder. And so we process a lot of information, much more information subconsciously than we do consciously. And we can make split-second decisions subconsciously because of how our brain operates. We need that. And so in business, it's not always about being the critical thinker. Sometimes it's about, how does it feel? Because we can get a feeling about partnering with a person. You and I have had this happen with us already. We were like, it just doesn't feel right. And we can't put our finger on it. So we can't critically make a decision, but we can make the decision because we know it doesn't feel right. Something feels off about that. And we hear people talk about it all the time. Now, you can't be guided just by intuition. You do have to have critical thinking in there. But I will say that where we've come in these last 6 months, where my business has gone in the last 6 months, it's not that I put critical thinking aside. It very much comes into play, but I'm following the lead of intuition and then checking in with my critical thinking afterwards, and to see what has happened, how we've gone. I would not have been able to get through COVID-19 in some of my businesses had I not taken that approach this year.
I agree 100%. Some people do way overthink things, and it stops them from making any forward progress. They're just afraid to make a move. I want to tack on to the emotional part of it, is that if you have a mission, if you actually have a written mission, then you have a North Star. That is what your critical thinking has to be focused on. Is this going to get me closer to my mission? And if it's not, it may be a really lucrative deal. It may be something that you really want to do. But if it's not going to get you closer to the mission, then you have some deciding to do. And there are a lot of factors. There are the emotional parts of it. There is the part of, of this decision, what can I actually accept and tolerate? Am I willing to go through that kind of a struggle because of this decision? But knowing that on the flip side, there's going to be this. Do I make this big investment? Do I take out this loan, knowing that I'm going to have this burden on me, but at the same time, my business will be able to do this? Those are critical decisions that need more than just numbers to be crunched. Most of these decisions will. They need to have some emotion. They need to have, your personal tolerance, your personal capacity to handle the decision, to handle the repercussions of it. Because sometimes, you're saying, this is a possible repercussion, but I can deal with that. And you do your critical thinking around, if that happens, then I do this. But sometimes it's like, I couldn't handle that. If that happened and I had to do this, I couldn't handle that. So your emotional resiliency comes in here. And this is where, again, it's good to have a team of people that can help you with these things, that help prevent those negative repercussions or, occurrences from happening. So a lot of it is risk tolerance. How much risk are you willing to take on?
Yeah.
From whether it's a financial perspective or an employee perspective, I don't want to be responsible for that many people, or, a growth perspective. I don't want to have to invest in a building. I want to just have my office. I mean, there's a lot of decisions that go into it. And if you do it without critically thinking through everything, then it becomes haphazard.
Yeah.
And there's no focus. And it's not tied to a strategy. It's tied to a whim.
Well, and I think to kind of tie this back to the beginning of the conversation we had here, as we look at this, you are the primary constraint in your system. Your employees, the people in different roles, they're the primary constraint in that system that they're operating. And yet, maybe the constraint you've put in play, maybe that constraint is something you've consciously chosen. And what I mean by that is maybe you've said, you know what, I only want to work 40 hours a week. And so I'm putting this constraint in the business, and maybe I'll find ways to work around it. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll be satisfied making $60, $70, $80, $150,000 a year, even though I know I could make more. Maybe I'm going to put that constraint on here. So constraints are not always a bad thing, but to be aware that you've made that decision, critical thinking and intuition come into play here. You've made the decision to allow that to be the constraint. No matter what you do, this is the key point, I think, of this whole thing. We'll kind of wrap it up here. No matter what you do, you are the primary constraint. The question is, have you deliberately chosen those constraints, or have they just kind of been the default constraints because you haven't grown yourself and you haven't looked at things critically and you haven't gotten the right things in place? That's where I'll leave it. If you have any last comments, Vinny, I'd love to hear those.
Well, I think that the biggest thing, or the last thing that I want to say is, sometimes we can't foresee the constraint because it's an obstacle coming from like our personal lives, a divorce, our health. All of a sudden we have a problem with our health. Losing the support of your family. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen from a personal standpoint that sometimes you just don't see. And you have to, the more you are tied to being the system and not realizing that everything that about you is a constraint, and you're not able to take yourself out of that system, the more vulnerable you and the business are going to be. And so it's sometimes it's about the thinking and the processes we put in place, but sometimes it's about, what if I break my leg and I can't be there? What if?
And on that we will go ahead and wrap today's show. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. If you have any questions, drop them into the chat. This replay will be out there for you. Or if you want, you can actually you can find the archives. We've got them on YouTube now as well, so you can search for CEO Secrets. If you have any questions or want a topic covered by us, then leave us a note, send us an email. You can reach Vinny or myself on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're available on all the major platforms. And you can also go to, if you want to check out our book, leaderbridge.net/leverage. That's the book we wrote together in 2016, 10-step process to help you basically move from where you believe you have nothing to achieving something that you want to in your life. So with that, we will sign off for this week. Come join us again next week at 9 a.m. Central. Every Friday, we're going to talk about principle number 4 next week.